Nobody kept straight face when Rodney Dangerfield showed up, in an era where stand-up comedy specials flood streaming platforms daily, with comedians like Samo returning for their 7th special, Tony Hinchcliffe launching Man of the People on Netflix, and Taylor Tomlinson delivering her 4th Netflix special. Audiences have become accustomed to polished performances and carefully crafted personas. Yet there remains one legendary performer whose raw, unfiltered energy transcends decades of entertainment evolution, a comic whose influence continues to ripple through modern comedy's DNA. Welcome to the unforgettable world of Rodney Dangerfield, a man whose contagious jokes infected everyone with non-stop laughter and proved that true comedy magic doesn't fade with time. IMDb. Rodney Dangerfield's legendary status stems from his revolutionary approach to stand-up. He weaponized vulnerability before it became fashionable. When you meet a woman, what's the first thing you look for? A room. This singular joke encapsulates his entire comedic philosophy: transform personal disappointment into universal recognition. Today's comedy landscape is experiencing a resurgence of interest in classic performers precisely because modern audiences crave authenticity that cuts through algorithmic content recommendations. Dangerfield entered a dating game segment already defeated before speaking a single line. His desperate loser energy made every romantic possibility sound like another setup for rejection, a technique that contemporary comedians study in comedy schools but rarely execute with such precision. The vulnerability wasn't an act, it was the architecture of his entire career. He suggested intimate activities with concerning casualness. What do you say you and I get out of here and go someplace special like the backseat of my car? Yet the comedy derived not from the line itself, but from a man wearing this much visible anxiety asking for anything at all. One of Dangerfield's most remarkable qualities was his refusal to dilute his nightclub persona for television audiences. While modern performers often adjust their delivery for different platforms, something evident in how contemporary comedians shift between intimate podcasts and arena tours, Dangerfield remained unapologetically himself. His appearance on a dating game show segment demonstrated this perfectly. Walking onto that stage, he carried an unmistakable aura, a man who already knew the room would reject him. His slouching confidence in defeat became comedy gold. The contrast between his appearance and the show's manufactured glamour created instant tension. His casual tone when suggesting they leave together, combined with his willingness to keep his tie on, created the illusion that he believed this desperate gambit might actually work. The joke worked not because of the line itself, but because a man carrying this much visible defeat was asking for anything at all. Rodney entering a fake dating game stage is already funny before he says anything, as his desperate loser energy makes every romantic possibility sound like another setup for rejection. Perhaps Dangerfield's greatest superpower was his ability to infiltrate glamorous settings and make them feel contaminated by his presence. Whether crashing a Hollywood party or interrupting a game show, he embodied the principle that any exclusive space automatically becomes less exclusive when he enters it. His interactions with established celebrities, from his exchanges with glamorous co-guests to his uninvited table insertions, consistently exposed how much work celebrities maintain to keep up their image. When invading Morgan Fairchild's Hollywood bash, he brought the same desperation that characterized his nightclub act. The party represented exactly the kind of glossy celebrity world his persona was never supposed to fit inside. He walks in like a man who already knows the room will reject him. After a few drinks, his attempts to charm spiraled into disaster. He complimented guests, mentioned his HBO show, and offered unsolicited advice about Mexican food. Every social move backfired spectacularly, yet the failures were the point. Unlike modern comedy, which often celebrates triumph through self-improvement arcs, Dangerfield's comedy existed in permanent defeat, and audiences couldn't stop laughing at the consistency of his failure. His appearance on Hollywood squares became Rodney's no-respect playground. When asked about whether the name Dangerfield comes from an English word meaning pasture, he approached the question with characteristic certainty in his own ignorance. Other panelists like Paul Lynde brought classic game show looseness, but Rodney brought a groovier club comic energy into the middle of it. He struggled to keep the applause going with Bob Zaney, demonstrating his inability to connect even with fellow entertainers. The setup with Bob Zaney turned applause itself into the problem, which was perfect Dangerfield territory. The crowd was supposed to be simple to control, yet basic encouragement felt like a chore nobody could handle correctly. His pairing with Mr. T created an odd television combination that worked entirely through contrast. While Mr. T brought physical confidence, intensity, and cartoon toughness, Dangerfield brought panic, slouching, and total social defeat. He never attempted to match Mr. T's energy. Instead, he stayed small and weirdly resigned, making Mr. T feel even more imposing. The comedian positioned himself as perpetually beneath the celebrity, which paradoxically made the interaction funnier. When Mr. T offered genuine compliments about taking care of oneself and staying healthy, Dangerfield wandered off into tangents about refried beans he'd eaten for lunch. Yet his inability to stay focused or accept the kindness made the exchange far more entertaining than any prepared sketch could have achieved. In today's comedy ecosystem, where comedians carefully construct their brand voice across multiple platforms, Dangerfield's complete indifference to consistency is almost shocking. Dangerfield's appearance on In Living Color presented a fascinating time displacement. Here stood a nightclub comic from the 1970s and 80s, navigating a sketch comedy show from the 1990s with younger comedians like Jamie Foxx, and somehow making the format feel like an attack on his character. Jamie Foxx represented a younger comedy generation moving at a faster pace, while Dangerfield refused to accelerate. He brought his old-school defeated persona without making any adjustment for the different audience or format. The contrast worked immediately because Dangerfield sounded like he'd wandered into the wrong decade and still managed to lose everything he came in with. His descriptions of his apartment building robberies, break-ins, assault through mail slots felt authentic to his standard no-respect setup even when displaced into the Fox-era comedy landscape. Time displacement became another form of his universal setup, rejection not just from people, but from context itself. Being pulled over by Jamie Foxx's character gave Dangerfield a simple power imbalance, which was perfect for his style since his persona always worked best when playing the man getting pushed around by every available authority figure. He escalated from apartment complaints to wife insults with the confidence of someone absolutely certain the officer wouldn't believe his life could actually be this pathetic. His justification that calling AT&T to be rehired had failed completed the character arc. Even his employer had abandoned him. The traffic stop works as comedy precisely because Dangerfield never tries to appeal to authority or defend himself, he simply accepts the next humiliation as inevitable. His historical bloopers segment remains perhaps his most visionary work. Playing Professor Quentin Curthers, he dragged his no-respect attitude into places where it absolutely shouldn't exist. History is supposed to feel grandly important and worthy of solemnity, yet Rodney's presence made it seem cheap, messy, and personally insulting in the specific way that only someone who'd been personally insulted by everything could make it feel. The comedy emerged from watching serious imagery get punctured by his sweaty complaints. He brought nightclub comic instincts into a produced television sketch and kept the tone from ever getting too clean or polished. His ability to make historical settings feel like personal grievances against significance itself remains unmatched in comedy history. The segment showcases his genius for finding the angle that confirms nobody was ever going to give him a break. Not even in settings that had been dead for centuries before he arrived to complain about them. He analyzed ancient events through the lens of someone certain the universe had designed all of history specifically to exclude him. Dangerfield's face throughout the segment carried that specific expression he used for decades, a man who expected to be mistreated and found the confirmation of his expectations both exhausting and entirely unsurprising. The historical setting amplified his no-respect persona since history by definition is a record of people who were respected enough to be remembered. Rodney's presence inside that record made the comedy land on multiple levels simultaneously. His ability to make the sketch feel like a personal visit from someone the universe specifically chose to exclude from every honor made the audience laugh at the comedy and at the specific truth underneath it. In 2026, as streaming platforms overflow with comedy specials and comedians compete for algorithm attention, Dangerfield's raw authenticity feels increasingly revolutionary. His refusal to soften his edges or modernize his approach creates a strange paradox. The more polished contemporary comedy becomes, the more audiences hunger for the unfiltered desperation he embodied. His comic brilliance wasn't about clever constructions or carefully timed punchlines, though he possessed both. Rather, it was about commitment to a specific emotional truth: the universe was rigged against him, and somehow that injustice was hilarious. Unlike modern comedy that often celebrates resilience or personal growth, Dangerfield's comedy lived in permanent defeat, and audiences couldn't help but recognize something profoundly true in that refusal to overcome. Rodney Dangerfield created unforgettable comedy moments that made everyone around him forget how to keep a straight face. He reminded audiences everywhere why he became one of the most beloved entertainers in television history. Without his unique no-respect genius, these appearances would have been ordinary television moments instead of the classic clips fans still watch and share decades later. His technique of finding the angle that confirms nobody was ever going to give you a break transcends era and platform. While contemporary comedians chase trends and algorithm optimization, Dangerfield's classic moments continue circulating because they documented something eternally human: the specific sting of being underestimated, undervalued, and perpetually on the outside looking in. His refusal to defend himself, his commitment to defeat, and his ability to make rejection feel both personal and universal created a comedic legacy that modern performers still study. Whether appearing on game shows, infiltrating celebrity parties, or standing alongside iconic figures, Dangerfield maintained the same core truth: life is rigged against certain people, and acknowledging that injustice with humor is the only rational response. His ability to make serious settings feel contaminated by his presence, his refusal to adjust for different audiences, and his commitment to the specific pain of social exclusion gave his comedy a timelessness that transcends the decades separating his heyday from contemporary streaming culture. The resurgence of interest in Dangerfield's material during an era of algorithmic content delivery reveals something important about authentic comedy: it endures because it reveals truths that never become dated. An audience in 2026 watching a clip of Dangerfield being rejected at a Hollywood party recognizes the same fundamental dynamics that audiences experienced in 1985. The specific texture of his failure, the way he absorbed rejection without defending himself, and his absolute certainty that the next situation would go exactly the same way created a comic character so complete that he transcends the medium in which he performed. Which Rodney Dangerfield moment made you laugh the hardest? The answer likely reveals what truth about human rejection you recognize most vividly in your own life. That's the lasting power of a performer who weaponized desperation into art. His comedy didn't promise redemption or transformation, it simply documented the experience of being perpetually overlooked, and somehow made that documentation so honest and so committed that it became the funniest thing in the room. No respect? Perhaps. But his influence on comedy and popular culture remains one of the most respected legacies in entertainment history.